All right. Hey, welcome back.
Hello.
Hey, everybody. If you are watching out there in the video land, by all means, feel free to drop a comment, by the way. But welcome back to the Creative Economy. This is our weekly interview series where we talk to voices and players, or we chat with voices and players from the creator economy about all the things happening, impacting the growth of the industry. We do go live on Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Pacific time. So you can find out more over at created.show is the official show page for the Created Economy. We are streaming today on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Not Twitch. Twitch hates us. We also do post longer form content very rarely over at createdeconomy.com.
We're working on it. We're trying a few things.
There's short attention span theory here. We can't do long form content. But feel free to join us over at Create Economy. It does have a mailing list to get updates about other things that are going on as well. And while you are checking us out, by the way, do give us a follow on social media. Oh, I think our slides are a little out of whack here. But we're Created Economy basically everywhere. And as Ken was showing just previously, we do have 3 shows a week. We do on Wednesdays sort of our working sessions, our office hours. We are about to embark on building a new NFT for an artist friend of ours and show you how to do that and mint it all the way through. Wednesdays, we do our interviews, as you know, and Fridays, we cover the news. So looking forward to seeing you at one of those. But Ken, without further ado, let's jump right into it. Oh, actually, we have, I guess, our AMA drop this week. So if you like free money, feel free to scan this QR code or head over to bit.ly/AMA-drop-20, and you can get some free cash on us because the AMA coin, it's our rally-backed coin, but it is also the official coin of the show. So feel free to drop in and grab some. It's on us. We do have a Slack. We don't talk about comments yet. Thanks, Wesley. We don't pay attention to comments at all. We also are excited today to have Amanda joining us from TechCrunch. She covers the creator economy. But let's bring her in and have her tell us a little bit more about herself.
Hello. Hi, Amanda. How's it going?
It's going well. I'm glad to be here and talking to you both.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the things that past guests that we've had have been a wide range of I guess, all parts of the creator economy, from investors to builders to creators themselves. But like, I think they all come at it from one specific part, and they, there's obviously a tad bit of like bias of it to their degree. So it's great to have somebody who in the journalism side to kind of really give an unbiased look at like, hey, how do we make sense of all the stuff that we're talking about in terms of, creator funds, Web3, whatever else is out there, and see like what's going on. But before we get into that, yeah, as Greg was talking about, Amanda, why don't you give us a little bit of a background in terms of who you are, what do you cover at TechCrunch specifically, and how did you get into the creator economy space?
Yeah. So my name is Amanda Silberling. I'm based in Philadelphia. And at TechCrunch, I cover, of course, the creator economy, but also social media platforms, labor, digital culture more broadly. I think the broadest way is saying how tech affects people, which it's a great catch all because that means anything. And I've always been, I guess, like a creator in the sense that as a writer, I've been in a position where it's like you just have a ton of W-9s that you're filling out. And that's the definition of a creator. How many W-9s do you have? But I've definitely like been in the position before of thinking about like how does my social media impact my brand and how do I like grow my following and leverage that into like getting more paid work in a field that I care a lot about. And then I think also because of that background, I think a lot about how creators can build sustainable businesses because I think I'm just coming in with all my hot takes right off the bat, but I really hate the term passion economy because I think
Good.
that kind of I think that sort of um erases the fact that it's like yeah, like I feel extremely lucky to be a journalist and do work that I care a lot about and I'm sure like TikTokers feel that way, YouTubers feel that way, but it is really difficult work and it is really exhausting work. And so I'm really interested also in writing about how creators can build more sustainable businesses and take care of themselves while doing what they love.
Passion economy is two lies at the same time, right? It somehow presumes that other people who work don't have passion for what they're doing.
Yeah.
And it also sort of pretends that the only thing motivating you is your passion for
Mhm.
it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you
Yeah.
kind of see, I guess it's kind of like a standard thing. Anything in tech, there's always some sort of economy, right? It's like, oh,
Mhm.
let's talk about, when Uber and Lyft and Postmates, all these came out, you're like, oh, it's a sharing economy. Then it changed into the collaborative economy. And then all these other things like, okay, is tech just very label obsessed? Like
We
you just
love buzzwords.
yeah, you gotta label everything, It's like, okay.
I don't think it's an inappropriate concept though, because
Mhm.
tech is often the leader or leading disruptive force, right? And so you are usually disrupting business models and fundamentally like sort of the economic space, like in one way or another. So I kind of understand it, right? Like, but yes, there are
Mhm.
economic flows kind of everywhere, right? Like, and I think even to your point though, Amanda, just going back, writers are inherently always been like some of the original artists, right, and creators in the world, and very few jobs are as creative as like writers, especially journalists who have to do it every day, with a pretty decent amount of volume, right?
Yeah.
Like most artists don't have to produce sort of in that kind of interval.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, the creator economy buzzword doesn't bother me really. Like, I know some people will be like, oh, it feels so awkward to be like creators. But I really like, if anyone has a better catch all phrase for like people who are making a living on the internet by like building an audience and producing creative work, then please let me know.
Okay, well, by the way, that is a good definition of the creator economy. I do
But that's a mouthful.
that is it. Nobody said it's the concise economy, right?
No.
Well, now you've turned a new economy. There's another buzzword, and then I'm going to branch off from that. We're going to have it be the succinct economy, and then the abrupt economy after that. But Amanda, like, I guess to a jumping off question is, where do you like? What are some of the things that you're seeing about the state of the creator economy itself? Like, there's obviously been a lot of news in the past, let's call it 2 years since the pandemic, where this era kind of has really taken off, although to be honest it's been around for many years. But what is it about this now, like, that you're seeing is like, hey, these are some of the issues at play, and these are some of the storylines that you're looking at?
Well, to jump to another buzzword, I think especially within the last 2 years, I would connect it with the Great Resignation. I'm just coming in with all the buzzwords. But I think like what's really exciting to me about the creator economy is that like I don't think 10 years ago people would think that posting cooking videos on YouTube is a viable career. But like these are things that take a lot of skill and talent. Like you're developing recipes, you're marketing, like if you're a food YouTuber, as the example. And I think that especially as the labor market in the US more broadly is sort of, I mean, we're in a time when there's like more unions than ever, and like people are realizing that maybe they're not getting paid appropriately to do like customer facing jobs in the middle of a global pandemic. And I think that this is pushing people towards figuring out different ways to do work. And I think in a lot of cases, if you have somebody who's really creative, then it is possible to try to build your own business on the internet. And I think that's really exciting. But as I alluded to before, I also think that it's something that needs to be treated with a lot of care because burnout is easy. And I think there is a intrinsic anxiety in like maybe you're super famous on TikTok today, but in a year, like what if people just aren't interested in your content anymore? Then what?
Yeah. So I want to raise a bunch of different points there. Specifically, I mean, let's talk about the mental health issue, because I think obviously that's a big thing in tech in general.
Mhm.
And I think with those that are participating in this Great Resignation, if you will, is they're abandoning, they're taking this leap and saying, I'm done with this job. I want to follow something that I, pardon the phrase, passion about, of what I'm like. I want to go be a creator. And then obviously there's pressure there, because you're like, okay, you're starting something completely like as a startup. And then on top of that, there's added weight because the uncertainty of this pandemic that's going on. So should there be more responsibility by the platforms themselves to support these creators in doing that? Or which side kind of really bears that responsibility? And I'm not saying like, oh, one's right or wrong. It's just what would your take be on that? And like, should we be surprised that platforms would offer support for this type of stuff?
I feel like there's pros and cons to this because on one hand, I feel like some really um, good advice in the creator world is that platforms aren't your friend. And if you trust one platform too much, that might not be the greatest business move. Like if you're a YouTuber and then YouTube, like, let's say you make like 2-minute videos that are really fun and people love them, and then YouTube then decides that they're going to prioritize longer videos with how they serve content, then you're kind of like, you have to rethink everything. So I think I do really want to emphasize the advice of like diversifying what platforms you're using. But I also think that like, yeah, if platforms want to like give creators money, why not? Like I'm all for people making money, but then that brings us into some issues that have been very like discussed lately about like how useful is a creator fund versus a partner program that has revenue sharing. And I think there's just a lot of complicated factors going on here. But I think short answer is I'm all for if TikTok wants to expand their creator fund. Yeah, cool, do it.
And speaking of which, like you and so for those that are watching or listening, I used to be a tech reporter myself, writing for VentureBeat and the Next Web, and I know many people in the tech journalism space, specifically at TechCrunch. Matthew Panzarino was formerly my boss. So
Twins.
yeah, and I'm very dear friends with Alex Wilhelm, who you work alongside with on for I think the Equity podcast as well.
Yeah,
But
I sometimes guest on Equity, but I
yeah,
think Alex and I mostly collaborate on memes.
well, That is fitting. I would think that too.
Yeah.
But there's an article that I saw. Well, the headline, it led up to a podcast you did recently. But I kind of want to stick with I was hoping you could dissect the headline a little bit for me. It was like, it wasn't, and I'm paraphrasing. It was something to the effect of like, forget about creator funds. You want creator index funds. Can you elaborate more on like what you mean by that? And like, was it something in jest, or was it something like, is this, how should we be thinking about this? Is it a legitimate
Yeah.
thing?
I think that was more of like a joke because, the equity people make a lot of jokes.
Of
And
course.
on that episode, we talked about like one of the co-hosts, Natasha Mascarenas, mentioned a friend who was running a company where you like invest in creators in some way, which
Mhm.
I think that's an idea that you see come up a lot in like Web3 creator economy spaces of like creator coins and whatnot. But so she was talking about that, and then Alex made some finance joke that probably went over my head. And it was something about like bundling together a bunch of different creators. And then I had the joke of like, oh, well, what if instead of like index funds, it was like, I'm going to invest in the top 100 food TikTokers. And so I think that was the joke.
Okay.
I don't know how good of an idea that actually is, but love to repeat my jokes.
Well, and so let's talk about the creator funds, right? I mean,
Mhm.
you've there's certainly been a lot of noise about them, especially since in the past week. I think it was YouTuber or TikToker Hank Green. He was like, you know what? I'm not getting paid for enough for my work, right?
Mhm.
But then you see a lot of these creator funds, and from on the surface, you're like, hey, this looks good. This sounds good. Like, yeah, you're supporting these creators, and to a certain degree, it almost sounds like it's bribery in disguise, right? Because it's like, hey, I as a platform am giving you, the creator, $100,000 to create something, and then, but that's only for 3 months, and then I'm hoping that'll get you hooked, like it's a drug. But it's like, how do you, are creator funds good? It's like, where are we now with them? Should they be improved? Should startups that are thinking about attracting creators think, hey, let's do creator funds ourselves? Like, where do we stand on that?
So I think that what Hank Green was pointing out in his video, which essentially, so a lot of the data on how monetization works on TikTok isn't public because it requires individual creators to go like, this is how many views I got in a specific time. This is how much money I made in that same time. And then you kind of have to work backwards to figure out how much you're getting paid per 1,000 views of your content. And so basically Hank Green was able to use data from his own TikTok, where it's very funny that he's popular on TikTok because he's like 40. And,
Hey, there's nothing wrong with being 40.
there's nothing. No, I am a Hank Green fan, but it is it's like, it's all the Gen Zers and then Hank Green like talking about science. But yeah, so he was able to use his data from his TikTok to like figure out that maybe like a year ago he was making 5 cents per 1,000 views, and then now he's making 2 cents per 1,000 views. And the idea behind that is like TikTok is a really, really fast growing platform. They were one of the fastest platforms to reach 1 billion monthly active users, which they did later last year. And as they grow, the size of the creator fund has not grown. So that essentially means that as TikTok is becoming more successful, creators are getting less of a payout. And you could argue that like people go to TikTok because they know that they want to see the content there, and that creators are what gives TikTok some of its value. And so Hank Green's point was that this creator fund isn't fair in that way. And I think it's like I wrote an article where the headline was maybe creator funds are bad. And of course, it's like the headline is not the whole story. Like, I think if it was maybe like we're going to give away like this amount of money over a certain period of time, and it's going to be the same like payout per 1,000 views. I think there's ways of using a creator fund to fairly compensate creators, but basically like the comparison was with something like the YouTube partner program where you're getting 55% of ad revenue share if you're part of the partner program. And in that case, there's really no cap on how much you can make. And as YouTube succeeds, the creator is also succeeding. So then YouTube over the last 3 years paid out, I believe it was $10 billion over 3 years to creators. And TikTok's creator fund is like 200 million, I believe, give or take. Either way, like huge difference. And on one hand, like TikTok is a super new platform. YouTube has been around forever.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, the way that you would monetize these videos is totally different anyway, because you could have like a 20-minute explainer on YouTube, or you could have like a 10-second joke on TikTok. And so there is a lot of nuance there, but I think that generally, I think that it might be better for creators in the long run to do more of these like percentage revenue share systems than creator fund systems.
So this is something from, I guess you're just on your analysis, like that would be something as creators are saying, hey, would I want Snap's creator fund or LinkedIn's or, TikTok's, or I don't know, whoever, like Clubhouse is one, for example, right? What would that? How is that the funding divvied up? Like to look more specifically at how the payouts are done, as opposed to, is it, how high is that percentage? It's almost like looking at an interest rate for if you're buying a home or making a big purchase, like, or setting up a retirement fund or anything like that. It's like, how much money am I actually going to get, and what is it going to be based off of? And is that the fault of these platforms, of these tech companies, that they're not being as forthcoming to creators? Do you,
I think generally like transparency is usually a good policy, but I think I mean, it's one of those things where it's like you say, like, oh, TikTok is giving away $200 million to creators. Like, that sounds amazing. But then you think about how the parent company ByteDance made something like $50 billion last year. And 200 million sounds huge, but that is an extremely small fraction of 50 billion. And so, yeah, I mean, in terms of other platforms, I think Instagram Reels is a really interesting case where I think when Instagram Reels first came out, everyone was like, are you kidding? This is literally a clone of TikTok. Like, how do they get away with this? Nobody's going to use it. It's so easy to see right through what they're doing. But people are using Instagram Reels because, like, at least creators I've talked to say that they make more money from Instagram's creator fund than TikTok's. And I also wrote about how Instagram was doing these like Reels bonuses where um, it's not really clear how certain people get flagged for the program, but it's like you might have a situation where it's like how many, depending on how many views you get, it's like a gamified like bar where you want to fill up the bar to see how much money you can get. So a friend of mine had something like maybe like 9 million views in a month to get $8,000. Like that was the challenge that she was given. And so she said, oh, well, I'm going to make sure I upload a reel every day this month to try to get that money. And so it's like, for her, it worked because obviously she got more views because she was uploading more reels and then she got money. And that's great. But that also works for Instagram because now here she's paying more attention to to Instagram than TikTok. But then there's the whole other side of like Instagram's algorithm does not promote videos that have the TikTok algorithm or that the TikTok watermark.
oh yeah, if you
So then, yeah,
post, yeah, everyone always favors original or native uploads,
yeah.
things like that. Yeah.
But then people figure out how to get away with like figuring out how to export their TikTok videos without the watermark, and then you can put it on Reels, and then it's very funny.
So speaking of TikTok, why do you think that TikTok is living rent free inside the heads of Mark Zuckerberg and Evan Spiegel? Like you look at the you look at the earnings report. I think it was this week or last week. I don't even know what day it is anymore. Time is irrelevant.
Yeah.
But you look at it and you're like, yeah, Zuckerberg says, hey, we're going to focus on short form. We're focusing on video. Again, like, yes, we've known that. You've been saying that for years. You want to focus on video. You want to focus on video. But apparently that now he's officially saying, or at least according to reports, he's saying, hey, TikTok's a threat. And same thing for Evan Spiegel from Snapchat. Like, why are these companies so afraid of TikTok? And is that indicative of anything in the creator economy space? Like, that's kind of, at one point and during Web 2, Facebook had dominance amongst creators, and now everyone's like, we're not doing Facebook. Facebook's the where the 40-year-old Hank Greens are. We're going to go to TikTok. Like, that's where we want to go. Like, why do you think that? Do you think TikTok's like, haha, we're living rent free, sucks to be you guys? But like, how do we make sense of it all?
I mean, I think that TikTok is a threat to Facebook and Snapchat, and they know it, because if you think about, like, these are companies that have existed for like over a decade, and then like TikTok has only really like risen to prominence in the last couple of years. Like, I mean, they've existed before that as like Musically and whatnot, but like they really have had like really like unprecedentedly fast growth. And I think that especially for Facebook in particular, there's been data showing that Gen Z users are spending a lot less time on Facebook than maybe users of the same age had spent like 10 years ago. And so I think as Facebook realizes that they're losing that demographic, then they look and they see that TikTok has that demographic. And so I think it makes sense that they're looking toward TikTok, but I also think that sometimes these social media apps can be very copycat of each other. And even when we acknowledge it, we still just, I mean, we're being streamed to Twitter Spaces right now. So, and it's like Twitter Spaces it's really caught on. But I mean, you see the same thing happening with TikTok and short form video as you do with live audio rooms and Clubhouse. And like Clubhouse isn't as hip and cool as it was like a year ago.
Oh yeah.
And
Now
I think
has it. I mean, Reddit has announcement today.
yeah.
I saw on TechCrunch, where it's like, yeah, they have an update with live audio with their live audio version, and obviously you have Spotify and Facebook has one, LinkedIn has one as well. I was like, they're going to have one, but no, they actually announced it. Yeah, so you're right. I mean, there's a lot of copycats out there, and I think that's kind of the MO, the different pattern that you see in as something kind of blows up. You're like, oh, okay, like MySpace has this, so okay, yeah, Facebook's going to have this. And I think back in the day when it was just Snapchat and Facebook. Snapchat was living rent free in Facebook's mind, and so every single time Snapchat would launch a feature, Facebook would basically copy that. And Kevin System's like, yeah, we had admitted that, yeah, they're copying these features and putting it into Instagram, right? And then Facebook went all crazy and decided to put stories in literally every single product that they have, which made very weird sense. I mean, it's like Messenger stories, WhatsApp stories, Instagram stories, Facebook stories. Like, okay, relax, like enough with that. But
I have held off on, I have never posted a Facebook story.
I've posted a Facebook story via Instagram story.
Yeah.
Instagram. So it's always gone through Instagram.
But even that, it's like, I think from a consumer perspective, it's easy to be like, oh my God, Instagram's copying TikTok. Like, they look so silly because they quite literally took this concept and remade it in their app. But then it's like, I mean, with the sample size of one, at least for me, like there was a period of time when I was posting the same story on both Snapchat, and then I would go and post the same thing on Instagram for like my audience of my friends. And then I was just like, no one uses Snapchat anymore. I'm just going to like do Instagram stories now.
Yeah.
But obviously people still use Snapchat, but
of course. Yeah.
yeah.
And apparently they're seeing on if you base it on their solely on the amount of growth that they did last quarter, Snap's up, Facebook's down. So it's like, maybe that's indicative of where, like, as you're saying, like the Gen Z audience and younger audience, they're like, no, we're done with Facebook. This is maybe the prophecy that Facebook had like years ago. We're like, oh, we're losing a teen audience. Like, yeah, that time is now. You are clearly losing that teen audience. I have a question in terms of just overall, right? From the creator space, because you see like, talked about live audio, that being Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces and so on and so forth. We talked about short form video, and obviously there's link in bios and all these other different things, and especially Web3 type technologies. It's basically the Wild West of tech and the creator economy. Like, what do you see as kind of like emerging as a winner? Or do you see, is there any way, are we too early to kind of declare what a potential winner is, or what a front runner technology would be in this space?
I guess for me personally, I really like the model of membership platforms, whether that's like Patreon comes to mind or something else. I think it's a way of facilitating, like, as a creator, you know that you're going to bring in a certain amount of money per month, and these are coming from your like maybe like top 10% of fans, and you can communicate with them directly about what they want to see, like what kind of bonus paywalled content they want from you. So I feel like I like the way that Patreon operates, because it does give you a more secure like monthly income, even though obviously maybe like, who knows, all your followers can decide they don't like you anymore and pull their support, but that is not super likely to happen. But
it's pretty low churn, right? In general.
Yeah. So I think in that regard, I think what makes Patreon work, in my opinion, is that they are creating a more sustainable way for creators to make a living. And I also think that just generally, I feel like the Gen Z audience wants like more authentic interactions with creators. But I feel like it's a double-edged sword, because then it's like, if a startup is like, we're trying to do authentic like meet and greets or something, it's like, how authentic is it? Like, I think it's kind of a paradox there. But
I have a question for you, I guess, though. Like, I get like sort of that Patreon has enabled a mindset of sort of patronizing a creator. The thing I don't get about Patreon is like, they also have not really helped you create very much surface area to, like, more importantly than getting there is increasing that value, right? Like, and that's what I think is that like the most problematic thing to me about Patreon, where they are. And like, for example, they're going to get a leg taken out as Discord introduces paid subscriptions for Discord. Was like a third of I actually did this. I was building software for a creator economy. I looked at all the top Patreon people. 1/3 of them are using Patreon literally to gate access to Discord, right? And with Discord offering that directly, well, then now I don't need to pay Patreon to do that, especially if it was like a hassle to have one thing happen for another thing to happen, right? I guess, what are your thoughts, as a creator as well, but also I just guess when looking in the space, how do you see this evolving? Because I do believe, like, to your point earlier about like your frame of like creating sustainable businesses, a sustainable business is one that has increasing revenues, right? And low churn, right? And so you kind of need both to like actually survive, right? Like, so that's, I'm curious, like what you see the opportunities are, like for creators, like, one, I think Patreon obviously is working on it. widening the berth of, features that they're going to offer, but I guess just anything beyond that or outside of it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that Patreon doesn't really have like a discoverability system, but I guess also maybe that's like not the point of Patreon. Like generally you're being directed there because like you like somebody's podcast and they send you. But yeah, I mean, I think it will be really interesting to see what happens when Discord unveils the subscription servers, because I know, like, I've definitely subscribed to people's Patreons because I wanted to be in the Discord before. And I mean, I think that also kind of maybe in the long run, that's a good thing for creators, because then they'll have the option of like, maybe they like Patreon's system better. Like maybe they like the integration with Discord through Patreon better than what Discord does, and it gives them more options. I feel like that's more of a negative for Patreon than it is for the creators themselves.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess my point is that
Yeah.
eventually, though, if Patreon doesn't innovate, it will be bad for the creators if they have to start changing their rates to survive, or if they like end up like, cutting off a part of their business, or, or some of these other things. I just feel like they've been a little too comfortable, in my opinion. Right.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point too, in that like, even if Patreon does help you have a sustainable business, you're still relying on a particular company for so much of your revenue. And I think that is a risk. And I think that when we talk about diversifying platforms, Patreon is also part of that, where if 100% of your income comes from Patreon, you're really putting a lot of eggs in one basket. And even like, this might lead us into like another part of the conversation, but something that kind of behind the scenes, a lot of like creators I know are a little worried about, and something that I've talked to executives at Patreon about is, are they going to do crypto or not? And I think it's really complicated because like my running joke, which is only funny to me, is that I'm very ambivalent about crypto. Like I think some stuff is bad. I think some stuff is good. I think that like there are good things and bad things. And
well, that's usually the case with all tech, right? I mean, it's like,
what a horrible life you have. You've not just had all good things.
I know. Yeah,
but can't it all be positive?
But I think that like that comes into play with the idea of like, will Patreon do crypto or not? Because like,
yes,
it's such a device. Like it is such a divisive thing right now, where I know creators that have had fans be like, I'm not going to support you if Patreon does crypto because I think that's bad for the environment, which then you have to dig more into like, okay, well, what blockchain are they using and how environmentally taxing is that? And like, then there's the whole,
but to the point, you could also say the same thing about like, oh, using Facebook, are they being is their technology being environmentally sustainable? Like, yes, or are you physically going to their data centers to actually see how much power are they using? How are they doing the climate and everything like that? And you kind of hear like, oh, Facebook's building a new campus, so they have like sustainable roofs and blah, blah, blah. And they're not using paper anymore or whatever. Like, Zuck's using sunscreen that won't, pollute and kill whales. Like, okay, like we get it. And I think that's the same thing. I think that's something that every company and every technology creator has to address. And I don't think that's I agree that like from a crypto standpoint, it's like, yes, it hurts climate change. And yes, we take that very seriously now more than many years ago. But I mean, I think there's other complexities at play when it comes to crypto. But that also opens up to another question I have is, how do you feel about Web3, right? And we talk, I mean, you just kind of opened Jimmy that door. I'm like, okay, well, let's walk through it. I mean, is Web3 synonymous with the creator economy, or or did somebody just decide to jam a square peg into a round hole?
Yeah, we're really keeping with the theme of like buzzwords in this discussion. Love the like
You
recursiveness,
stop
but
using English words.
We need a
but
little more than anything. But
I would say that the creator economy is not synonymous with Web3, but I think it's like a Venn diagram rather than a Venn diagram that's actually just a circle. Like there are some creators that are using like blockchain technology to help them run their business and help them find new ways of creating money. There's also creators that aren't and don't want to do that. And I mean, I think just generally, I feel like a lot of creators in my circles that I talk to are very skeptical of Web3 soon, which I think is partially like the marketing crisis of crypto, where it's like everybody thinks that it's just like people with monkey profile pictures on Twitter, which it's like that's not true. But at the same time, like,
It's also true.
yeah, and I think people are rightfully skeptical of Web3 projects, especially when, like,
The scams.
yeah, there's so many scams, and this is technology that is really confusing to wrap your head around. And I think something that gets glossed over too is like, I learned about Web3 because it's literally my job to do so, and I get paid to do that. But it's like, the average person isn't going to go home and spend 4 hours looking up like how the blockchain works. And I feel like I don't think people have quite done the best job possible with making that information like accessible, which I mean, it's hard because it's really confusing. Like, it's one of those things where it's like the more you learn, the more questions you have, and that's hard to explain. But I think that it's going to take a lot for people to really onboard people that are rightfully skeptical when what they see on Twitter is like scam after scam after scam. And I know that's not representative of all crypto communities. And I know that there's people that are working on like really innovative, interesting projects, but like that stuff I know because it's my job to know it.
Yeah, I'm probably in the camp that Web3 is a subset of. Sorry, I think the creator economy will be a subset. It's kind of moving to be like fully contained by Web3. I guess would be where I think it goes, right? Because I think what ends up happening. By the way, when YouTube and Facebook and everyone rolls out like NFTs and other stuff, they basically enlarge the circle such that those social platforms are Web3 platforms as well, which is why I basically believe you end up with this scenario. But the reason I think it's really important or interesting is like if you look at the mechanism of why you were buying Patreon, which was to unlock access to Discord, Web3 actually solves for that, like like in an extremely easy and simple way, right? And it also offers the ability to build a lot more utility on top of it, right? Like not just sort of like, hey, you're in, but like, where are you in and how are you in? And can I reward you in other ways? So my guess is, I think you're right. Like, I think the UI problem is real. The UX problem is real. The social challenges are real. The cultural problems are real, right? Like all the problems are real, like for sure, without a doubt, it is ripe with challenges and issues. But like you said before, 10 years ago, no one would have thought you could like make a living for like, doing a cooking show, making a video of you cooking something, right? No one, but by the way, we're going back to something old. In the past, you always could charge for access for your time, right? And Web3, I think what creators are going to extract from it is like a meaningful way of saying like, hey, the time with me is valuable. I can offer rings or layers of intimacy and access, right? That I can now unlock because of this. And I can make it affordable and free at the same time in different ways, however I choose, right? Because today it's all hardened, right? Like it's either like you charge for access or you don't, right? And you make your money from advertising. All of that will go like in different ways, right? Like, oh, you've been a subscriber for 6 months, you get access to the VIP no matter what. Doesn't matter, right? Like, doesn't matter if you bought it this month, right? Like, oh, did you get the 1 year chip, for being here like a subscriber for a year straight? Great. You're automatically in the VIP. It doesn't matter. Right. Like these kinds of things where we don't have to tax every moment. Like we don't have that ability, that middle ground today as creators, I think. Right. Like to work with our fans in ways. And also I would say, by the way, I've made this point in the past. I think that creators, and this is a controversial take on it, they're just as big of like robber barons as the big platforms are, right? Because the $1 million, the $10 million Mr. Beast makes on his video is because of those fans, right? And they don't get he gives away some money and it looks like it's nice, but no, where's our take, right? Like you have zero business if we leave. You have zero business if we disappear, yet we're not participants in that, right? And that's the point, like that I think the fans, the ownership parts and aspects that come with Web3 are really powerful for creators who didn't have a way to try to cut their fans in on the action, right? And also who can scale in way new and interesting ways by picking up all those passionate fans to help them scale in new and interesting ways.
Oh, there's that word passion again.
Passion is a word. Passion economy is banned. But
that should be that should be a new headline on TechCrunch. Passion economy.
We should make a T-shirt with passion and economy and just cross off the economy part.
Good idea. Yeah, but
we're just pivoting here.
I mean, I think that like I am interested in the idea of how fans can have like an ownership of like as somebody who they followed when they had 100 followers suddenly becomes like super famous, then they kind of get something for being like an early adopter or whatever. Like I think that's an interesting concept, but then in terms of things like you get a chip for being a subscriber for a year, stuff like that, I'm like, does that really need like Web3? Like that's something that already happens on Twitch.
It doesn't, but the problem is that if it happens on Twitch and you go anywhere except Twitch, it's almost impossible to reward. Like you're not a developer, right? Like, and like, like for example, my last company was built on top of the Instagram API. And when Instagram decided to be a bunch of assholes and change like this thing to go that way versus this way, our whole business got wrecked. Right. And the point was that like, even when you had a venture-backed company trying to build solutions to help like creators do better, right? The platform could still ruin your life, right? Like, because they're like, well, we don't think this app is doing a good thing because it's helping you share your revenue with your fans, right? And they cut it off, right? And so the things about Web3 I think that are important that maybe like folks often miss, right? Is that it's a persistence tool and it's a payments tool, right? And if we look at that, like persisting the fact that someone's a fan so that everyone can know it, right? That means that everyone can also build things to acknowledge it, right? But yes, it exists in Twitch, right? But the reality is that if Twitch decides that they don't want to let somebody have access to that data anymore, then basically all of the opportunities and options that you could offer on top of it are go away also, right? Or if they get restrictive, Discord is great, but it has rate limits, right? So like you can't read Discord infinitely, right? You can't see everything that happens in Discord. And so if you wanted to build something great that was going to happen for your Discord folks, you still have to operate within the rate limits of it. If you want to use the Instagram API. And so what ends up happening is you as a creator, you may as well make a backup copy almost of all these activities out to the blockchain so that you have the ability to do whatever you need to do regardless of which platform you are on at the moment.
But I think, Greg, to what you're saying, or actually what Amanda was saying, is that there is that education, and I completely would agree with you, Amanda, because it's very much the odd couple on this show because Greg is super involved in Web3 and blockchain, and like he's more on the obviously he's been a founder and entrepreneur. I'm more on the eyewitness, the observing side. So it's like I know like up to this point. But then he knows like what's underneath the surface. So it's like it's that education certainly is lacking in the technology in Web3 in general, right? Because I think you talk about like you're right. Can't you do these type of things with on Twitch or on Discord? Like why do we need to have all this blockchain and all this other stuff? Like, well, because you can like anything that you can do is just been different. It has been repeated in Web3. And the only difference is that I think, to Greg's point, is like it's that data portability type of aspect, right? Because
that's
like,
one of the main benefits,
yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
Do you remember, like, this is generational, by the way, right? Remember when there was no internet and then everything was I this or E that, right? That was the same crap, right? Like people are like, I already have these records. Why do I need it like on a computer?
Or
then it's like, why do I need it on the internet, right? And then so like there's always resistance. I think up front, and some of that resistance is well deserved because like it's risky, it's tricky, it has maybe like well-known negative side effects, right? But eventually those things sort themselves out, right? And so I don't think anyone should get into this crap for the sake of getting into this crap, right? Like I think, for example, if you're a creator and you're like, I think my business could be 100x if I figure out a way to involve my fans in it, then you should start researching this pathway, right? Literally, like that's a great reason to be doing it, right? If you're like, I want to be a creator for the next 20 years and I don't want a platform to be able to steal my data or take my data and put me in a spot where I don't have access to the people that I should have access to, you should be looking at some of these technologies or at least building a damn mailing list, right? Like, so, right. Like, but you see what I mean? Like don't go into like, don't follow along, right? Like I think folks would service themselves well by going into these things because they see an opportunity, and more importantly, an opportunity that can be shared. Right? Like, because I think if you don't see it from a shared point of view, you personally means you're going to end up in the scammy bullshit area, right? Like, my bet would be like 90% of creators will do a nice job for their fans and for themselves when they enter Web3. And then there's already still that 10% that are total shitheads, right? That have like scammed their fans intentionally, bought a Tesla, and then put videos up of it online, right? Like that stuff is going to happen because it's everything that involves human nature has that built into it.
Yeah. But I think, I don't know. I mean, if you have somebody who's already like running a sustainable creative business using Web 2 tools, if they don't totally understand Web 3 or they think that there would be friction with their audience, then is there really a benefit at this moment to getting into it? Because I think you could argue that like, well, technology's already evolved, like it's always evolving, and like
I don't think you should alienate your audience. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't be researching it and maybe just not doing that work with your existing audience. Like maybe there's a new audience you could be building, right? Like Web3 provides another side effect is it's a huge liquidity pool. So there's a lot of money available to people who do new and interesting things, right? Maybe it's not your core audience today. Maybe it's, the next audience you want to add to your full audience, right? So I think like, yes, I agree with you entirely. Like I said, don't alienate. I wouldn't do this to the extent that you're going to alienate people. But I guarantee you, if you do anything in Web3, you're going to get attacked a lot, right? Yeah. So you kind of got to get used to it. But like most creators I know, what do? They don't even read the comments anymore because getting attacked is also normative, right? Like, you're like,
we don't read the comments.
It doesn't matter what you say. Like, I saw this guy commenting like, and it was about an NFT thing an ad that he had. And he's like, I could put an ad up for toothpaste from a sponsor, and I guarantee you someone's going to complain about it. Right. Like, this was like my thing with like when it was younger in college, and I was like, why I could never get along with vegans was that not there's nothing wrong with being vegans, but back then it was a lot more polarizing because it was like there's this political element built into veganism for some, right? Where it's not about like the health benefit. It's literally like, no, I don't eat sugar because like there's a sugar factory in South America that doesn't pay like great wages, right? Like. And so like it's extrapolated so far out that yes, you can always find a reason to hate like everything in the world, right? I don't know how productive that is, right? Like, but you're free to whatever choices you choose to make. So my point is like, is there a better time than now? Maybe, right? But is there a worse time than now? Maybe not, right? Like, because the early learnings is what gives you that early advantage, right? Like if if you're 3 steps ahead of everyone else, you're figuring out how to like succeed before everyone else figures out how to succeed. Now, maybe don't do that in public. Maybe try that in a new venue, whatever it is, right? But I don't know. I don't think people should rush to it. I think you should be able to imagine use cases, and you should have more convos about it as opposed to like dismissing it. This is my point.
Yeah. I'm not entirely convinced, like, at this very moment, that if a creator came to me and said, like, point me in the direction of a Web3 creator economy startup that could help me. Like, I don't know. I mean, I wish that this was not live right now when there's something I'm working on that hasn't been published yet. But like,
Well, I,
I,
I know we're running on short on time, so why don't we just kind of end it and with this final question? Then it's like, what do you well, and this is quite apropos. Like, what are you looking for now as a reporter in the creator
We have
economy?
screen sharing. You can show us your draft.
Trust me, under embargo, that's fine. But also, like, what are you looking for in terms of getting pitched from founders, from builders in the creator economy space? How do they reach you, and what kind of stories do you want to hear?
well, the best way to reach me is by email. My Twitter DMs are open, but that's generally for people that are like, "Hey, I want to like give you a tip about this thing I heard." But
Mm.
then when people pitch me like PR via Twitter, I'm like kind of annoyed by default. But that's also not their fault because I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I am like on the more skeptical side when it comes to Web3, but I'm also like open and interested in hearing from companies that might be doing something interesting with Web3 and the creator economy. But I think like I'm very protective of like, I want to give airtime, so to speak, to companies that I think are doing something that is helping creators. And I think sometimes with Web3 stuff, it's still really hard to say, like, I mean, I think you can sniff out a scam pretty easily, but like
Hard. It's hard sometimes.
sometimes. But but it's like, yeah, that's the thing is like sometimes you can see a scam from like miles away, and sometimes it's like, I'm not quite sure about this.
Yeah.
Which, even the thing I'm working on, it's like, I'm not like endorsing it by writing it, but by writing it, I'm saying I do think this is an interesting concept, and I think that it's worth thinking about. Because ultimately, like, I'm not an investor. My job isn't to say like this is good or this is bad. My job is to say I think this is interesting, and I'm going to explain why.
Yeah.
But
I think it's fair. It's totally reasonable to be skeptical about a lot of this stuff. I mean, we're early days, right? Like, we don't need cheerleaders. We need realists, right? Like,
Mhm.
and I love that you're true to helping the creator. That's the best lens in my book, right? Like, if you can't imagine, if you're like, would anyone fucking do this, right? Like, yeah, I think you should call bullshit on it, right? Like, I mean, that makes sense to me,
Mhm.
right? We do that all the time on the show, by the way. So, and we are maxis on like the creator economy, right? Like, we believe in it, like we want to see it succeed, but like we can't always squint hard enough to make it seem viable, right? Like,
Yeah. Even something that I've been thinking about over the past few months is I did see an uptick in pitches about like all-in-one creator platforms where it's
uh,
like, instead of having a Patreon and a MailChimp and like all these different companies that you're using, like, why not just have it all in one platform? And I think that with that, there's sort of a tension there because it's like, yeah, it is really useful if you have your MailChimp and your Patreon in the same place. But then, like, what happens if that startup folds? Because we know that realistically, a lot of startups fold.
yeah,
And that's an area where it's like, I think the people building that kind of stuff are really well intentioned, but I have started asking the question of like, okay, so like knowing that a lot of startups fail, if your startup fails, what do you do with the creators that are using the platform? Like, what happens to them?
Point. Yeah. Good point.
well, and at the same time, it's like, so is the connectivity or the friction-free environment, but trading the fidelity of the feature set, right? Like, is that like, at what point is that the right trade-off, right? Like,
Mhm.
is it, if you use n number of tools, you're probably better off with an all-in-one versus like, if the primary drive, like, but you should use the best tool for the primary driver of your revenue, right? Like, if your mailing list is 90% of your revenue, would you like suddenly take on like some shitty tool that like has, like a day one feature, when you could be using, a public company's version of the same thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Well, thank you, Amanda. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your
I'm to
busy.
talk to somebody who has the same job as us sometimes. Well, you have the real job. We have like, the fake job, but.
Well, and
No,
that's why having a journalist on here, because it's giving you that unbiased view, right? They're looking at all sides and saying, hey, this is, instead of like cheerleading, this is actual reality. This is the stuff that works or doesn't work, and they're not gonna they're not afraid to call a strike. So Amanda, thank you so much. Really enjoy reading your stuff on TechCrunch and our news show every Friday. We bring up all these articles, and usually they're from either from you or from the information or BI, like, and it's just constant, like, oh my God, like, where do you get these stories from? So really appreciate you joining us on the show, and looking forward to reading more of your stuff in the future. So really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, and thank you for having me on the show.
We appreciate it. Thank you for actually jumping in like
No.
kind of late for us too. But this was great. And by the way, you're always welcome to join us if you want to help come and cover the news Friday.
Oh man, there's
We'll
a lot of
you,
news.
we're like read your mean comment. Like that segment on tonight. You can read
Jimmy Kimmel. Yeah, mean tweets. Yeah.
Read your mean tweets.
Oh, I do. I mean, speaking of Web3, I do get tweets where like I'll write something that has nothing to do with Web3, and then you get like the people with like 10 followers that are like, "This is how Web3 solves this," and I'm like, "No."
I get the tweet like, oh God.
Can you just start making a list for us? We need that as our comic relief in the middle.
Yeah.
We'll just dissect the tweet itself.
Just look at my Twitter replies, and I don't know.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much. Truly a pleasure to have you here, and I'm sure we'll be talking about some of your articles. I'm looking at one of your articles right now.
Interesting.
I think we'll be talking about it on Friday.
Right.
Talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Be
Bye.
well. Bye. All right, Ken, good job. Sorry I had to leave there for a little bit.
Always leaving me hanging, I tell you.
Well, you seem competent enough at this job.
Well, usually once we have all the technology and the stuff at play, it kind of flows, Anyway,
let's get back. We will likely be here Friday. There's a small chance we may have a scheduling conflict. So just in case we can't, definitely tune in though, because this show will definitely be going on. I know Wednesday we have is this Wednesday coming? Chris is here.
This Wednesday is Chris Hewer, yeah.
Yeah, a week from today we have Chris Hewer, our friend who's now one of the co-hosts and organizers of the Web 3.1 conference. We'll explain. And our friend Shauna will be joining us as well. Talk about brand strategy and the creator economy. So I think, as you guys can see, we try to keep it fun and lively, but your comments and your reactions help make us continue. So keep it coming. We appreciate all the feedback and all the questions and comments that we get along the way. And on that note, Ken, I will see you later.
All right. See you, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Peace.